I pulled up to Lydia's apartment building just after midnight. Blue and red lights painted the walls in frantic patterns. Police cars blocked the entrance. Neighbors clustered in small groups, whispering behind their hands. I parked badly and ran toward the building, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I saw him, Marcus Hale, Lydia's husband, being led out in handcuffs. His expensive suit looked wrong against the metal restraints. His face was blank, emotionless. I pushed through the crowd, searching for my sister. That's when our eyes met. Lydia stood in the doorway of her luxury apartment, perfectly still. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't calling for help. She was staring at me with something that looked like pure terror. Not sadness. Not shock. Fear. Raw, desperate fear that I was standing there, witnessing whatever had just exploded. In that moment, I understood something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a marriage collapsing. This was something Lydia had fought desperately to keep hidden from me specifically. I made it past the police tape. An officer tried to stop me, but Lydia waved him off. I stepped inside the apartment I'd visited a dozen times before. Everything looked perfect, white furniture, fresh flowers, expensive art on the walls. Everything except Lydia's face. She turned on me the second the door closed. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, cutting. "I didn't call you. Nobody called you. You weren't supposed to come." I stepped back, confused. "Lydia, I saw the police." I was worried. She laughed, but it sounded broken. "You've ruined everything. Everything. Just by being here, you've destroyed it all." I felt like I'd been slapped. Around us, police officers moved through the apartment, collecting evidence, taking photographs. They treated Lydia gently, like she was fragile. But she was looking at me like I was the enemy. "I don't understand," I whispered. She turned away. "Of course you don't." For 3 years, Lydia's marriage had been perfect. At least, that's what everyone believed. Her social media showed endless photos of romantic dinners, weekend getaways, and Marcus gazing at her like she'd hung the moon. Our church praised them as an example. Our relatives pointed to them whenever someone got divorced. "Why can't you be more like Lydia?" Aunt Patricia had asked me once. I was the unstable sister. The one who changed jobs too often, dated the wrong people, lived in a cramped studio apartment. Lydia had the fairy tale. Now, standing in her perfect apartment surrounded by police, I watched people avoid my eyes. The same neighbors who'd smiled at Lydia's Instagram posts now whispered behind their phones. But they weren't whispering about her. They were looking at me, the messy sister who'd somehow shown up at exactly the wrong moment. As if my presence had caused this disaster instead of simply witnessed it. Marcus was halfway to the police car when he stopped. 2 officers held his arms, but he twisted back, looking directly at me. The crowd had grown larger. Phones were recording. But Marcus didn't care. His voice carried across the parking lot, just loud enough for me to hear over the chaos. "She made sure you never found out." 4 words. Simple. Clear. Devastating. I froze. Behind me, I heard Lydia's sharp intake of breath. When I turned, her face had gone completely white. Her hands shook. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely terrified. Not of the police. Not of the arrest. Of what Marcus had just said. Of what I might do with those words. The officers pushed Marcus into the car. The door slammed. But those 4 words hung in the air between Lydia and me like smoke. Found out what? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She just stared at the police car as it drove away. The police finally left around 3 in the morning. Lydia hadn't spoken to me in hours. She'd answered their questions in a small, broken voice that didn't sound like her at all. When the last officer closed the door, I thought we might finally talk. Instead, Lydia walked to her purse and pulled out her checkbook. "I need you to leave," she said. "Leave the apartment? Leave the city." She started writing, her hand shaking. "I'll give you $20,000. Right now. Take a trip. Visit Europe. Stay away for a few months." I stared at her. "Lydia, what's happening?" 30,000. She ripped out the check. "Take it. Please. For your own good." But it wasn't for my good. I could see it in her eyes. She needed me gone. Not for my safety. For hers. "What did you do?" I asked. The check fluttered to the floor between us. Lydia's face crumpled. "Please don't make me explain." I went home, but I couldn't sleep. At dawn, my phone chimed. One new email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. Just an attachment. My hand shook as I downloaded it. The document was a scan, old and slightly faded. At the top, in formal legal language, I saw my name, trust fund beneficiary, and at the bottom, clear as day, was Lydia's signature. But it wasn't on a witness line. It wasn't on a family acknowledgement. Lydia's signature was on an authorization form. A transfer document. A legal redirection of assets. From me. To her. The date was 7 years ago, just after our mother died. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the document was notarized. Official. Legal. My phone chimed again. Another email from the same anonymous address. This one had just 2 words, she knew. I spent the morning researching. The trust fund had been established by our mother before she died of cancer. She'd wanted to make sure I was taken care of. I'd been younger, less stable, still finding my way. The fund was supposed to mature when I turned 25. But when I'd reached that birthday, Lydia had told me the trust had been dissolved. Legal fees. Medical bills. Nothing left. I'd believed her. She was my sister. She'd handled everything after Mom died. Why would she lie? Now I understood. The trust hadn't been dissolved. It had been redirected. Every cent that should have come to me had gone to Lydia instead. And the timeline made my stomach turn. 7 years ago was when Lydia got engaged to Marcus. When she'd thrown that enormous wedding. When they'd bought this luxury apartment. Her perfect life had been built on money stolen from me. Built on my mother's final gift to me. I drove back to Lydia's apartment. She answered the door looking exhausted, her perfect hair unwashed, her makeup smeared. "Go away," she whispered. I pushed past her. The apartment looked different in daylight. I saw it clearly now, the expensive furniture, the designer kitchen, the art worth thousands. All of it purchased with my inheritance. How much? I asked. Lydia closed her eyes. How much of my money did you steal? It wasn't stealing. I was going to pay you back. How much, Lydia? $240,000. The number hit me like a fist. $250,000. Gone. Spent on her fairy tale while I'd struggled to pay rent, eaten ramen for dinner, worked double shifts. Marcus's business, I said slowly, remembering the boutique investment firm he'd opened 3 years ago. You funded that too, didn't you? Lydia sank onto her white couch. He never knew where the money really came from. My phone rang that afternoon. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. It's Marcus. His voice was rough, tired. They gave me one phone call, and I used it on you. I need you to know something. I waited. I found out about the trust fund 2 years ago. I was organizing our finances, and I saw the paperwork. When I confronted Lydia, she broke down. She told me you were dangerous, unstable, that you'd tried to steal from her before. My breath caught. She showed me emails, supposedly from you, threatening her, demanding money. She said if you ever found out about the trust, you'd destroy her life. Maybe hurt her physically. I never sent those emails. I know that now. But she was so convincing. So scared. I believed her. I've spent 2 years thinking you were this damaged, volatile person who couldn't handle the truth. I helped her hide it. Why are you telling me this? Because she set me up, Marcus said quietly. And she'll do the same to you if you let her. I called an emergency family meeting. Uncle Thomas, Aunt Patricia, Cousin Beth, and several others gathered in Patricia's living room. I brought the documents. I explained everything carefully, sticking to facts, avoiding emotion. They listened in silence. When I finished, Uncle Thomas cleared his throat. Lydia has been under tremendous stress. This sounds like a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She forged legal documents. She stole $250,000. Aunt Patricia's face hardened. Your mother's death was hard on both of you. Lydia had to handle everything. Maybe she made mistakes, but this vendetta? Showing up at her apartment when her marriage is falling apart. Digging through her finances. You've always been jealous of her success. Cousin Beth nodded. You're making this about you when Lydia's the one suffering. I looked around the room. They'd already decided. Lydia was the golden child, the perfect daughter, the success story. I was the mess. The troublemaker. Nothing I said would change decades of that narrative. I went to see the lawyer who'd handled our mother's estate. Mr. Franklin was old now, semi-retired, but he remembered our family. I showed him the documents. His face went pale. This shouldn't exist, he said. Your mother named you as sole executor of the estate. You were supposed to have complete control once you turned 25. But Lydia said, I don't know what your sister told you, but these signatures removing you as executor are forgeries. I never notarized these documents. He pulled out the original will. There it was, in our mother's careful handwriting. I was the executor. The one with legal authority. The one who should have controlled everything. Your sister committed fraud, Mr. Franklin said quietly. This isn't a family disagreement. This is a crime. And suddenly Lydia's fear made perfect sense. She hadn't feared me knowing about the money. She'd feared me discovering I had the legal right to audit everything she'd done. To investigate. To prosecute. All this time, I'd had the power. I just hadn't known it existed. I started making calls. People Lydia had been close to over the years. The pattern emerged slowly, but it was clear. Her college roommate had been accepted to a prestigious graduate program until someone sent the admissions board anonymous allegations about plagiarism. Unproven, but enough to rescind the offer. Lydia had gotten the scholarship instead. A coworker had been up for promotion until HR received a detailed complaint about workplace harassment. Investigated. Dismissed. But the woman left the company anyway. Lydia got promoted. Our cousin Natalie had been dating someone wonderful until he received messages supposedly from Natalie saying terrible things. He broke up with her. Months later, he started dating Lydia. They dated for 6 months before he figured out what she was. She destroys anyone who threatens her, Natalie told me over the phone. Anyone who might outshine her. Anyone who might expose her. I tried to warn people, but no one believed me. Lydia was too perfect. The anonymous emailer contacted me again. This time with bank statements. Marcus had been preparing to leave Lydia. He'd opened a separate account. Hired a lawyer. Started documenting financial irregularities. That's when things had escalated. Lydia had reported Marcus to the police for domestic violence. The charges were vague but damning: emotional abuse, financial control, threatening behavior. She'd filed for a restraining order. Then she'd accessed their joint accounts and transferred everything to accounts only she could access. She'd reported Marcus's business to regulatory authorities, claiming financial misconduct. By the time Marcus realized what was happening, his reputation was destroyed. His business was under investigation. His assets were frozen. The night I'd arrived at the apartment, police had arrested him based on Lydia's claims. But the evidence had been manufactured. Every text message, every email, every witness statement had been carefully constructed. Marcus hadn't been abusive. He'd been set up. Just like me. Lydia went public with her story 3 days later. A long, emotional post on social media describing years of hidden abuse. Marcus's controlling behavior. His financial manipulation. His threats. She positioned herself as a survivor, finally free. For 24 hours, the post went viral. Thousands of supportive comments. News outlets picked it up. Domestic violence organizations shared it. But then people started asking questions. Why had Lydia's friends never noticed signs of abuse? Why had Marcus's colleagues never seen concerning behavior? Why did the timeline of events not quite match her story? A journalist dug into the police report. The evidence seemed thin. Contradictory. When reporters asked for interviews, Lydia suddenly went silent. She deleted the post. Made her accounts private. But screenshots existed. The internet never forgot. And people who'd believed her initially now felt manipulated. The narrative was shifting. Slowly. But definitely. I scheduled a meeting with the investigator assigned to Marcus's case. I brought everything: the trust fund documents, the forged signatures, the timeline of events. I spoke calmly. Factually. Without anger or accusation. Just evidence. The investigator listened, taking notes. "Why are you bringing this to me?" she asked. "Because the truth matters. Whether it helps Marcus or hurts Lydia isn't my concern. What happened to me is separate from what happened to him. But the pattern of behavior is relevant." She studied me carefully. "You could pursue criminal charges against your sister yourself." "I know. I'm considering it. But first, I want to make sure Marcus isn't being prosecuted for something he didn't do. That's more urgent. The investigator nodded slowly. Most people in your situation would want revenge. I want justice. They're not the same thing. She smiled slightly. No. They're not. Lydia showed up at my apartment late that night. She'd been crying, her face was red and swollen. Please, she said when I opened the door. Please, I'm begging you. Drop this. I didn't move. I made mistakes. I know I did. But I'm your sister. Doesn't that mean anything? You stole from me. You lied to everyone about me. You destroyed my reputation. I was scared. Her voice broke. Mom always loved you more. She trusted you more. I was terrified of being forgotten. Of being nothing. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then her expression changed. The tears stopped. Her voice went cold. If you don't drop this, I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I have years of documentation showing your instability. Your drinking. Your bad decisions. I'll destroy you. There it was. The real Lydia. Not broken. Not desperate. Calculating. Get out, I said quietly. She left. But I knew this wasn't over. The investigation moved quickly once real evidence emerged. Financial forensics experts traced the trust fund theft. Handwriting analysts confirmed the forged signatures. Digital forensics recovered deleted emails showing Lydia's systematic manipulation of Marcus. The charges were extensive. Fraud. Identity theft. Forgery. Filing false police reports. Obstruction of justice. Over a decade of calculated crimes. The marriage hadn't fallen apart overnight. It had been rotting from the inside, built on lies so complex they'd eventually collapsed under their own weight. Marcus's arrest had just been the final crack in a foundation that was never solid. Investigators found more. Lydia had been preparing to disappear with their remaining assets. She'd opened accounts in the Cayman Islands. Started researching new identities. The domestic violence claim hadn't just been about framing Marcus. It had been about creating cover for her exit strategy. She'd been planning this for months. Uncle Thomas called me. I owe you an apology. I waited. We should have listened. We should have believed you. Lydia, we didn't know who she really was. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. She was easier to believe than me. Silence. Then, can we fix this? I don't know. Aunt Patricia wanted to take me to lunch. Cousin Beth sent flowers. Other relatives reached out with apologies, explanations, excuses. They wanted reconciliation. Forgiveness. A return to family harmony. But I couldn't pretend the years of dismissal hadn't happened. Couldn't forget how quickly they'd sided against me. I'm not angry, I told Uncle Thomas. But I'm not ready to pretend everything's fine either. That's not fair to anyone. What do you need? He asked. Time. And honesty. If we rebuild, it has to be on truth. Not comfort. The charges against Marcus were dropped. The prosecutor apologized. The media reported his exoneration, though less enthusiastically than they'd reported his arrest. His business remained damaged. His reputation scarred. But he was free. He met me at a coffee shop downtown. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't do it for you," I replied honestly. "I did it because it was right." "I know. That's why I'm thanking you. You could have used this for revenge. You could have let me burn while focusing on your own case. But you didn't." We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm sorry I believed her about you," Marcus said finally. "I should have questioned it. Should have looked deeper. She was convincing. She was. But that's not an excuse." I nodded. We'd never be friends. Too much had happened. But we could both move forward knowing we'd told the truth when it mattered. The courtroom was cold and sterile. Lydia sat at the defendant's table, flanked by lawyers. She wore a simple dress, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back. The perfect image of humility. But there were no tears this time. No dramatic displays. The evidence was too overwhelming for theater. As the charges were read, fraud, forgery, filing false reports, obstruction, Lydia's face remained blank. She didn't look at me. Didn't look at anyone. The prosecution detailed everything methodically. The trust fund theft. The forged documents. The systematic manipulation. Marcus's framing. The planned disappearance. Years of calculated deception. When they finished, the judge asked if she had anything to say. Lydia stood slowly. "No, Your Honor." That was it. The perfect life she built was collapsing in real time. No dramatic breakdown. No last-minute confession. Just the quiet, inevitable consequence of decades of lies finally catching up. The sentence came down 2 weeks later. 5 years in prison, though likely less with good behavior. Supervised probation afterward. Mandatory restitution of the stolen funds. Asset seizure to cover the debt. Community service. Lydia accepted it without expression. The judge's words stuck with me. This case represents a pattern of behavior designed to harm others for personal gain. The defendant showed no remorse until consequences became unavoidable. Justice requires accountability. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. About saying clearly that what Lydia had done mattered. That the people she'd hurt mattered. The stolen inheritance would be restored. It wouldn't erase the years I'd struggled. Wouldn't replace the opportunities I'd lost. But it acknowledged that what happened to me was real. Was wrong. That I hadn't imagined or exaggerated the injustice. The weeks after sentencing felt strange. Empty. For months, I'd been focused on investigation, evidence, truth-telling. Now it was done. The first thing I noticed was how much lighter I felt. Not happy. Not triumphant. Just lighter. As if I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I started therapy. Not because of what Lydia had done, but because I needed to understand who I was without her shadow. How much of my identity had been shaped by her lies? By the family's perception of me as the unstable one? By my own internalized belief that maybe I really was less than her? The work was hard. Painful. Necessary. I'd spent years measuring myself against Lydia's fake perfection. Now I had to figure out what I actually valued. What I actually wanted. Without comparison. Without judgment. Just me. The letter arrived 3 months into Lydia's sentence. Prison stationery. Her handwriting. I almost threw it away. But curiosity won. The letter wasn't long. No excuses. No justifications. Just acknowledgement. I spent my whole life terrified that people would see me the way I saw myself, ordinary, forgettable, not special. So I built this image of perfection. Every lie made the image stronger. And every lie made me more desperate to protect it. You were the biggest threat because you remembered who we used to be. Before the performance. Before the masks. You remembered the real me, and that version didn't match the story I was selling. So I tried to make you disappear. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not apologizing, because words don't fix what I did. I just wanted you to know I understand now. The perfect life destroyed me worse than the truth ever would have. You were right to tell it. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted her to suffer. But because I didn't owe her anything anymore. Not comfort. Not absolution. Not a relationship rebuilt on rubble. Maybe someday I'd feel differently. Maybe years from now we'd find some way to connect. But for now, my silence was enough. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the boundary I needed to protect the life I was rebuilding. I'd spent too many years shaped by Lydia's needs, Lydia's lies, Lydia's fear. Now I was choosing myself. Choosing peace. Choosing to move forward without hatred but also without the obligation to help her heal. She'd have to do that work herself. Just like I was doing mine. A year later, I understood something I'd missed that night at Lydia's apartment. She hadn't feared me because I was stronger or smarter or better. She'd feared me because I represented reality. I remembered our childhood before Mom got sick. I remembered Lydia's insecurities, her desperate need for approval, her fear of being ordinary. I knew that the perfect marriage, the luxury apartment, the flawless social media, all of it was performance. And deep down, Lydia knew I saw through it. The truth wasn't that her perfect marriage fell apart overnight. The truth was that it was never perfect. Never real. Just an elaborate construction that required constant maintenance, constant lies, constant sacrifice of everyone around her. And eventually, inevitably, it collapsed. Not because of me. Not because of Marcus. But because lies always fail. The truth always surfaces. Now my name is Vanessa Cole, and I'm finally free to figure out who that means. Thanks for reading my story. If you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe and follow for the next one.